I dropped 4 quarters onto the mahogany table. Clink, clink, clink. That was her inheritance. I watched her face crumble as the lawyer showed her that the $55 million had just been wire transferred to a dog shelter. She started screaming, clutching the keys to a G-Wagon she couldn't pay for. But then a sound cut through the room. Her phone started ringing. It was a shrill digital chirp. The caller ID flashed red. Bank fraud dept. She thought I was just a useless trophy husband she could dump at a gas station in the rain. She forgot I was the trust lawyer who built the estate, and I had just triggered the trap. Before we see the G-Wagon get towed, hit subscribe. This is the story of the trophy husband. The wipers of the S-Class Mercedes slashed back and forth, fighting a losing battle against the Oregon rain. It was a heavy, gray downpour, the kind that soaks into your bones and stays there. I sat in the passenger seat, staring at the blurred taillights of the traffic ahead on I-5. My hands were folded in my lap, resting on the damp wool of my black funeral trousers. They were shaking slightly, not from the cold and not from the grief, though God knows the grief was heavy enough to crush a younger man. They were shaking from rage. "Can you stop fidgeting, Arthur? You're vibrating the whole seat." Chloe didn't call me Dad. She hadn't called me Dad since she was 15 and found out what a trust fund was. She drove with one hand on the leather wheel, the other tapping furiously on her iPhone screen mounted on the dash. "Sorry," I said. My voice sounded like gravel. I hadn't spoken since the graveside service. "Just cold." "Well, turn on the seat warmer." "God, do I have to do everything for you? It's exactly like Mom used to say. You're just helpless." She laughed. A sharp, brittle sound that cut through the hum of the engine. She was 26 years old, beautiful in the way a shark is beautiful, sleek, predatory, and dead behind the eyes. She was wearing a black dress that cost more than my first car, and she looked annoyed. Not sad, not mourning the mother who had died of a sudden aneurysm 3 days ago. Just annoyed that the funeral had run 20 minutes over schedule. "She didn't say that, Chloe," I said softly. "Please, don't rewrite history just because she's in the ground. Mom was the titan. You were the poodle. You looked good in photos. You knew which fork to use at the galas, and you kept the bed warm. That was the deal. Everyone knew it." I looked out the window. That was the narrative Chloe had built in her head. Martha was the CEO of Kinetic Systems, the genius innovator. I was Arthur, the guy who played golf on Tuesdays and drank scotch on Thursdays. Chloe never saw the nights Martha spent crying in my office because the board wanted to oust her. She never saw the contracts I redlined at 3 a.m. because Martha was too exhausted to read the fine print. She never knew that the deal wasn't me being a leech. It was me being the anchor so Martha didn't drift away. "Pull over," I said, realizing we weren't taking the exit toward the estate. "I am," Chloe said. She jerked the wheel to the right, cutting across 3 lanes of traffic without a signal. Horns blared. She ignored them. We took the exit for a rundown commercial strip, a row of payday loan shacks, liquor stores, and a flickering Texaco station. The Mercedes bumped over the potholed concrete and screeched to a halt near the air pumps, far away from the shelter of the gas canopy. The rain hammered the roof. It sounded like nails. "Get out," she said. She didn't look at me. She was checking her Instagram notifications. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "Get out." She turned to me then, her face twisted into a sneer of pure contempt. "I'm done, Arthur. The show is over. Mom's dead, which means the charity work ends today. I'm not supporting a deadbeat stepdad for another 20 years. I'm your father, Chloe, biologically and legally. You're a dependent," she corrected, "and I'm cutting costs. I've got plans for the house, real plans. I'm restaging it for a photo shoot next week, and I don't want you shuffling around in your bathrobe smelling like Old Spice and failure." "Chloe, it's pouring rain. We just buried your mother. My clothes are at the house. My heart medication is in the bathroom cabinet." She pressed a button on the door panel. The trunk popped open with a mechanical thunk. "I packed a bag for you while you were crying over the casket," she said. "Essentials, a couple of suits, some socks, your shaving kit. You can buy new pills with your Social Security check, unless you spent that on greens fees already." I looked at her. I really looked at her.
I was searching for a shred of Martha in her face, some hint of the kindness or the vision that my wife had possessed. I found nothing. Chloe was a hollow vessel filled with greed and the arrogance of someone who has never earned $1 in her life. You can't just evict me, Chloe. It's my home. My name is on the deed. Was, she smiled. It was a terrible smile. Mom transferred the title to the trust 3 years ago, and guess who the sole beneficiary of the trust is? Me. I checked with Sal. It's ironclad. It's my house, my car, my money. You're trespassing. She leaned over and opened the passenger door. The wind roared in, carrying freezing spray that instantly soaked my shoulder. Out, now, or I call the cops and tell them you're becoming violent. Who do you think they'll believe? The grieving daughter of a tech icon, or the senile old man who refuses to leave? I sat there for 5 seconds. I could have fought. I could have stayed in the seat and made her drag me out. But that would have been undignified, and if there was one thing I had left, it was my dignity. I unbuckled my seatbelt. I stepped out into the rain. The water was shockingly cold. It soaked through my dress shoes instantly. I walked around to the back of the car. The trunk was open. Inside sat my old canvas duffel bag. It looked pathetic sitting on the plush carpet of the trunk.
I reached for it, but before I could grab the handle, the car lurched forward 3 feet. Chloe was messing with me. I stepped forward again, reaching for the bag. She reversed, knocking my shin with the bumper. I stumbled, barely catching myself on the taillight. "Whoops," she called out the window. "Clumsy." She slammed the gas in reverse, then slammed the brakes. The inertia sent the duffel bag flying out of the trunk. It landed with a wet slap in a puddle of oil and muddy water. I stared at the bag. It began to sink, the canvas darkening as it absorbed the filth. Chloe rolled down the passenger window. She was laughing. It wasn't a maniacal laugh. It was a casual, dismissive chuckle, like she was watching a funny cat video. "There," she said. "Curbside delivery. You're welcome." I stood straight. The rain was running down my neck, soaking my collar. I wiped the water from my eyes and walked to the passenger window. I placed my hands on the sill. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I lowered my voice so she had to stop laughing to hear me. "Chloe," I said, "are you absolutely sure you want to do this?" She rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, spare me the speech. Yes, I want you gone. I want you erased. We have the probate hearing on Friday. That's 4 days from now. If you do this, if you abandon me here, in the rain, without my medication, there is no going back. Are you sure you've read everything? Are you sure you know what you're doing?" She scoffed. "I know that I'm worth $55 million and you're worth the change in your pocket. I don't need to read anything. I have lawyers for that. Goodbye, Arthur." "Friday, Chloe," I repeated. "Remember that I gave you a chance." "Get a job," she screamed. She slammed her foot on the accelerator. The tires of the S-Class spun on the wet asphalt. A wave of dirty slush and rainwater erupted from the wheel well, catching me full in the chest. It plastered my tie to my shirt and filled my mouth with the taste of grit and gasoline. The Mercedes fishtailed out of the gas station, the V8 engine roaring a victory lap as it merged back onto the highway. I watched the red taillights weave through traffic until they disappeared into the gray mist. I was alone. I looked down at myself. My funeral suit was ruined. My shoes were full of water. I was 65 years old, standing in a Texaco parking lot, shivering uncontrollably. I walked over to the puddle and picked up my duffel bag. It was heavy with water. I unzipped it. She hadn't packed my clothes. She had stuffed the bag with old newspapers and a single framed photo of me and Martha. The glass smashed. This wasn't just an eviction. It was a declaration of war. I walked under the fluorescent lights of the station canopy. The attendant inside, a teenager with acne and a bored expression, stared at me through the bulletproof glass. I probably looked like a maniac. I reached into my soaking wet jacket pocket. My wallet was still there. I pulled out my phone. The screen was cracked from when I stumbled against the car, but it lit up. I didn't call the police. I didn't call a taxi. Not yet. I opened my contacts and scrolled down to the letter S. Saul. Lawyer. I didn't call him.
I just stared at the number. Chloe thought the game ended when Martha died. She thought the chessboard was cleared. She didn't realize that while she was playing checkers with her mother's money, I had been designing the board for 30 years. She wanted me to be the helpless old man? Fine. I slumped my shoulders. I let my face go slack. I started to shuffle toward the payphone, dragging my legs slightly. If there were cameras here, and there were always cameras, I needed to look the part. The architect was going to sleep. The victim was waking up, and Friday was coming. The Motel 6 was a beige box that smelled of stale cigarettes and lemon polish. It was only 3 miles from the gas station, but the Uber ride had cost me $20, surge pricing due to the rain. I handed the driver a wet $20 bill and didn't wait for change. Room 114 was on the ground floor, facing the parking lot. The carpet was a suspicious shade of brown, patterned to hide stains. I dropped my sodden duffel bag on the floor and walked straight to the bathroom. I needed to see the damage. The mirror was flecked with black spots where the silvering had worn away. Under the flickering fluorescent light, I looked like a ghost. My skin was gray, my hair plastered to my skull, my eyes rimmed with red. The mud from the gas station had dried into a crust on my cheek. I turned on the tap. The water ran rusty for a second before clearing. I splashed my face, scrubbing away the grit. I looked older than 65. I looked defeated. Good. That was exactly what Chloe needed to see. I sat on the edge of the cheap mattress and peeled off my ruined suit. As I sat there in my undershirt, shivering slightly as the motel's heating unit rattled to life, I thought about the lie that had defined my life for the last 25 years. Arthur the poodle. Arthur the leech. Arthur the trophy husband. That was the label the society pages gave me. When Martha and I met, she was a brilliant but chaotic engineer with a startup that was bleeding cash. I was a corporate attorney specializing in asset protection and trust law. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't a visionary. I was boring. But boring is what keeps you safe. When kinetic systems started to take off, the sharks began circling. Venture capitalists wanted to dilute her shares. Competitors filed frivolous patent lawsuits. The IRS started sniffing around. Martha was panicked. She wanted to sell out for pennies just to make the stress stop. I was the one who stopped her. I was the one who stayed up for 3 nights straight drafting the poison pill defense that prevented a hostile takeover in '98. I was the one who structured the offshore holdings to legally minimize our tax exposure, saving the company $40 million in a single year. Martha had hugged me then, tears in her eyes. "You saved us, Artie, but can we keep this quiet? The board, they need to see me as strong. If they think I rely on my husband for strategy, they'll lose faith." So we made a deal. She would be the titan, the Iron Lady of tech. I would be the supportive spouse in the background. I retired from my firm. I took up golf. I joined the country club. I let people whisper that I was lucky to have snagged a sugar mama. I didn't care about the credit. I loved her. I wanted her to shine. But Chloe grew up believing the lie. She saw her mother working 18-hour days and saw me relaxing. She didn't see me managing the private investments. She didn't see me vetting the household staff. She didn't know that every trust fund she dipped into, every car she bought, every vacation she took was possible only because I had signed the authorization forms in the background. To Chloe, I was a parasite attached to the host, and now that the host was dead, she was scraping me off. I walked over to the small desk in the corner of the room. I pulled a pen and a pad of motel stationery from the drawer. I began to write. Not a diary, a ledger. Debt analysis. Chloe. 1. Credit cards, maxed out, Amex Black. 2. Lifestyle burn rate, approx $400K a month. 3. Gambling debts, Macau trip, 1.2 million estimated. I knew about Macau. I knew about the boyfriend, Jax, a 24-year-old DJ who was currently driving a Ferrari registered to my wife's company. I knew that Chloe had been siphoning money from the operating accounts for months, thinking no one noticed because Martha was sick. Martha hadn't noticed. She was too busy dying. But I noticed. I had tried to talk to Martha about it 6 months ago. She was frail then,
bedridden. When I brought up Chloe's spending, Martha had grabbed my hand. Her grip was weak. "She's just acting out, Artie. She's scared of losing me. She's my baby. Please, promise me you'll take care of her. Don't cut her off. Not unless you have to." "I promised," I had said. I looked at the mirror again. The reflection stared back, tired, wet, homeless. "I'm keeping my promise, Martha," I whispered to the empty room. "I'm going to take care of her. I'm going to teach her the one lesson you never did." I picked up my phone. It was time to confirm the battlefield. I dialed Saul's personal number. He answered on the first ring.
"Arthur? My God, I've been trying to reach you. Chloe just posted a story on Instagram of her burning your golf clubs in the driveway. Where are you?" "I'm at the Motel 6 off the interstate," I said. My voice was calm, almost cheerful. "Jesus! Stay there. I'm coming to get you. You can stay in my guest house." "No, Saul. I need to stay here." "Why? You have money, Arthur. You have your own accounts. You don't have to play the martyr." "I'm not playing the martyr, Saul. I'm playing the victim. There's a difference." I paused. "Did she file the motion?" Saul sighed. I could hear papers rustling. "Yes, her lawyer sent it over an hour ago. Emergency motion for executor control. She's claiming you're mentally unfit. She cited erratic behavior at the funeral and signs of dementia. She wants full control of the estate before the probate hearing on Friday." "Perfect," I said. "Perfect? Arthur, she's trying to declare you incompetent. If the judge buys this, she can freeze you out completely." "Let her try." "Saul, listen to me very carefully. I need you to draft a new document. Do you remember the family unity protocol we discussed 5 years ago? The contingency plan?" There was a long silence on the other end. "The nuclear option?" Saul asked quietly. "Arthur, that clause, it's extreme. It requires specific triggers, brutal triggers. You have to prove she acted with malicious intent regarding your basic survival."
I looked down at my muddy trousers lying in a heap on the floor. I thought about the rain. I thought about the attendant at the Texaco station watching a 65-year-old man get thrown out of a car like a bag of trash. "I think I can prove it, Saul," I said. "Just have the paperwork ready for Friday." "And Saul?" "Yes?" "Don't tell her I called. As far as you know, I'm wandering the streets, confused and senile." "Understood. But Arthur, be careful. She's desperate, and desperate people are dangerous." "I know," I said. "So am I." I hung up. I lay back on the bed and stared at the water stains on the ceiling. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since breakfast. I reached for the packet of crackers I'd bought from the vending machine in the lobby. This was the calm before the storm. Chloe thought she had won. She thought she had discarded the useless old man. She forgot that the architect always draws the blueprints before he lays the foundation, and I was about to build a prison around her, brick by brick. I woke up at 6 a.m. with a flutter in my chest. It felt like a bird trapped inside a rib cage beating its wings against the bone. Atrial fibrillation. It wasn't immediately fatal, but without my bisoprolol, it was a ticking clock. I sat up in the motel bed, my joints stiff from the damp cold that seeped through the thin walls. My mouth was dry. I reached for the nightstand, instinctively groping for the orange prescription bottle that had sat on my bedside table for 10 years. My hand closed around air. Right. The gas station. The puddle. The eviction. I needed those pills. I could buy a toothbrush. I could buy a razor. I couldn't walk into a CVS and buy a prescription beta blocker without a doctor's order, and my doctor was in Europe for a conference until Monday. I had to go back. I showered in the lukewarm dribble of the motel bathroom, put on the same mud-stained suit. I had tried to sponge it off, but the stains just smeared into gray blotches, and called a taxi. The ride back to the estate in the pale morning light felt like a funeral procession of one. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a heavy, suffocating mist. We wound our way up the coastline, past the cliffs, turning onto the private road that led to the summit. Martha and I had bought this property 15 years ago. We built the house together. She handled the aesthetics, I handled the contractors. I knew every beam, every wire, every hidden fuse box in that house. It was my sanctuary. The taxi dropped me at the bottom of the driveway. I told the driver to wait. "I'll just be a minute,"
I said. "I just need to grab my medicine."
I walked up the long paved incline. The iron gates loomed ahead, 12 feet of black scrollwork topped with gold leaf. Usually they stood open during the day. Today they were shut tight. I approached the keypad mounted on the stone pillar. I punched in the code, 1984, the year we met. A red light flashed. Error. I frowned and tried again. 1984. Error. She had changed the codes. Less than 24 hours after the funeral, she had reprogrammed the security system. "Can I help you?" The voice was deep and aggressive. I looked through the bars. A man was walking down the driveway from the guard shack. He wasn't Jerry, the 60-year-old retired cop who used to wave me through with a smile and a recap of the Giants game. This guy was wide, wearing a tight black polo shirt with titanium security embroidered on the chest. He had a holstered taser on his hip. "I live here," I said, leaning against the gate. My chest gave another uncomfortable thump. "I'm Arthur Penelagon, Martha's husband." The guard stopped 3 feet from the gate. He wore mirrored sunglasses even though it was overcast. He consulted a clipboard. "I have a no-access list here, sir. Name's Penelagon." "I don't want to come in for a chat," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need my medication. It's in the master bathroom, second drawer on the left. It's a matter of medical necessity." "Sorry, orders are strict. No entry, no removing property." "It's not property," I snapped, my patience fraying. "It's prescription medicine. If I don't take it, I could go into cardiac arrest. Do you want that liability on your shift?" The guard shifted his weight. He looked bored. "Look, buddy, I don't know you. I answer to Miss Chloe. She said if you show up, you are to be treated as a trespasser. If you don't leave, I call the sheriff." I gripped the cold iron bars. I looked past him, up the winding driveway toward the house. That's when I saw it. Sitting in the middle of the circular driveway, right in front of the marble fountain, was a massive, rusted construction dumpster. It was an ugly, scarred metal beast that looked like a wound on the pristine landscape. And it was overflowing. I squinted. I saw the distinctive tartan pattern of my golf bag sticking out of the top. The graphite shafts of my Callaway clubs, a retirement gift from Martha, were snapped in half, jagged shards pointing at the sky. I saw books, dozens of them, my first edition Le Carré novels, my legal textbooks from Harvard. They were piled in a heap, their spines broken, pages fluttering in the morning breeze. And then, right near the top, I saw the album. It was the leather-bound photo album from our honeymoon in Positano. I saw a photo of me and Martha on the boat, her hair wrapped in a silk scarf, laughing as I tried to open a bottle of wine. The glass of the frame was shattered. The photo itself had been ripped down the middle. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the heart condition. This wasn't just eviction. This was an exorcism. She was purging me. "Hey!" I looked to the right. The front door of the house opened. Chloe stepped out. She wasn't alone. She was followed by a small entourage of people holding clipboards, fabric swatches, and cameras. A woman with severe glasses and a tablet was pointing at the dumpster and nodding. "Chloe!" I shouted through the gate. Chloe looked down the driveway. She adjusted her oversized sunglasses and walked toward the gate, her heels clicking on the pavement. She signaled the guard to step back. She stopped 5 feet away, safe behind the iron bars. She looked at me like I was a stray dog that had wandered back into the yard. "I thought I told you to get lost," she said. "My medication, Chloe," I said. "I need the bisoprolol. The guard won't let me in." She sighed, an exaggerated puff of air. "Oh my God, the drama. Always the victim. You can get a generic prescription at the free clinic, Arthur. Stop acting like you're dying." "I am observing," I said, pointing a shaking finger at the dumpster behind her. "You threw away the honeymoon album?" She glanced back at the dumpster and shrugged. "I'm decluttering. Architectural Digest is coming on Tuesday. They're doing a feature, The Young Heiress Reinvents the Estate. The theme is modern minimalist. Your dusty old crap didn't fit the vibe." "That's my life in that trash can," I said quietly. "It's clutter," she corrected, "and it's depressing. The stylist said the house had heavy energy, so we're purging the heavy energy."
She turned to the woman with the tablet. "Make sure that dumpster is hauled away by noon. I don't want that eyesore in the background of the drone shots." "Chloe, please," I said. The flutter in my chest was becoming a throb. "Just hand me the bottle. It's in the drawer. It will take you 30 seconds. I'll leave, I promise." She looked at me. For a second, I thought I saw a flicker of humanity. She was my daughter. I had taught her how to ride a bike on this driveway. I had bandaged her knees when she fell. She smiled. "No," she said. "No? If I give you the pills, you'll come back tomorrow for your socks, then your watch, then you'll be sleeping on the porch. I'm ripping the Band-Aid off, Arthur. It's for your own good. You need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet."
She turned to the guard. "If he's not gone in 2 minutes, taser him." She spun on her heel and walked back toward the house, discussing the color of the drapes with the stylist. "I want everything lighter," I heard her say. "Erase the dark wood. Erase the history. I want it to look like it was born yesterday." The guard put his hand on his holster. "You heard the lady. Move along, Pops." I stood there for a long moment. I memorized the sight of my broken golf clubs. I memorized the rip in the photograph. I memorized the sound of Chloe's laughter as she walked away. My chest hurt. I was dizzy, but my mind was crystal clear. She had just crossed the line. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. Denying me access to life-saving medication was a criminal act. It was reckless endangerment. It was malice. I needed that for the protocol. Clause 12B, I whispered to myself. Denied access to marital funds or basic necessities. I backed away from the gate. "I'm going," I said to the guard. "I'm going." I walked back to the waiting taxi. I climbed into the back seat, breathless and pale. "You okay, buddy?" the driver asked, looking at me in the rearview mirror. "You look like you're going to have a heart attack." "I might," I said softly. "Drive me to the urgent care on 4th Street. I need a prescription." As we pulled away, I looked back at the house one last time. The dumpster was being hoisted onto a truck. My past was being hauled away to a landfill. Good. Let her think I was erased. Let her think she had scrubbed the house clean of Arthur Penhaligon. Because when you clean a house too thoroughly, you strip away the protection. You remove the load-bearing walls because you think they block the light. Chloe was remodeling her life. She didn't know she was removing the only thing keeping the roof from collapsing on her head. I took out my notebook. Evidence item number 1, denial of medical necessity, witnessed by titanium security guard. Evidence item number 2, destruction of personal property, photographic proof needed. I texted Saul, "Get me a private investigator with a long-range lens. I need photos of the dumpster leaving the estate, now." Then I closed my eyes and focused on slowing my heart rate. I had to stay alive until Friday. I had to live long enough to see the look on her face when the heavy energy came back to haunt her. The waiting room of the urgent care clinic smelled of rubbing alcohol and damp coats. I sat on a plastic chair that was bolted to the floor, clutching a paper script for a generic beta blocker. It had taken 3 hours, a humiliating conversation with a triage nurse who clearly thought I was a vagrant, and a $100 copay I could barely afford to get the slip of paper. My chest still felt tight, but the immediate threat of cardiac arrest had passed. Now it was just the dull ache of stress and the sharper pang of betrayal. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It wasn't a text this time. It was a call from Saul. I checked the time. 2:15 p.m. Tuesday. I stepped outside, seeking shelter under the clinic's narrow awning. The rain had started again, a miserable drizzle that turned the city gray. "Talk to me, Saul," I said. "Arthur, tell me you're sitting down." Saul's voice was high, tight with professional panic. Saul was a good lawyer, cautious, methodical, the kind of man who wore a belt and suspenders. Panic wasn't his natural state. "I'm standing outside a strip mall clinic," I said. "What did she do?" "She's manic, Arthur. I've been practicing probate law for 30 years, and I've seen grief make people do stupid things. But this is financial suicide." I leaned against the brick wall. "Give me the numbers." "She walked into First City Bank at 9 a.m. this morning," Saul said. "She met with the VP of private lending. She flashed the Kinetic Systems name, played the grieving heiress card, and slapped a document on the table." "Which document?" I asked, though I already suspected.
"The 2019 draft will," Saul said. "The one Martha had drawn up before the diagnosis. The one that leaves everything to Chloe, unconditionally."
I closed my eyes. That draft was never signed. Martha shredded the original. I know that, you know that, but the bank doesn't know that yet, Saul hissed. She has a copy. It looks legitimate enough to a banker who sees a $55 million estate and smells a commission. She applied for an immediate liquidity bridge loan. How much? $2 million. I let out a low whistle. A bridge loan was a dangerous tool. It was quick cash designed to tide an heir over until probate closed, usually used to pay estate taxes or urgent debts. But getting one based on a draft will? That was fraud. And the terms? I asked. Predatory, Saul said. Because she needs the cash today and because the probate hearing isn't until Friday, they classified it as high-risk speculative. The interest rate is 15% compounding weekly. And, Arthur, this is the kicker, she pledged the house as collateral. She signed a personal guarantee. She doesn't own the house yet, I said. The bank thinks she does, or they think she will in 72 hours. They fast-tracked it. The money hit her account at noon. $2 million, I repeated. What does she need $2 million for on a Tuesday? She doesn't need it. She's burning it, Saul said. I have alerts set up on the estate accounts, but since she opened a new private account with the loan, I can't stop it. But I can see the transaction queries coming through the credit bureaus. List them, I commanded. Okay, first stop, the Cosmopolitan Tower downtown. She put a down payment on the penthouse suite. 3 bedrooms, rooftop pool. Asking price is $4 million. She put down $800,000 in cash for an expedited closing. She already has a home, I said, thinking of the empty rooms at the summit. She has a mansion. Not modern enough, apparently, Saul muttered. Next stop, Mercedes-Benz of Portland. She put a deposit on a G-Wagon. The G63 AMG, matte black, custom interior. That's another $200,000 gone. I laughed. It was a dark. Time moves differently when you are waiting for an execution. In the Motel 6, the hours dragged like lead weights. I had developed a routine in the 24 hours since I'd returned from the urgent care. I woke up, I took half a generic pill, rationing just in case. I walked to the vending machine in the lobby. I bought a pack of peanut butter crackers and a bottle of water. I sat in the plastic chair by the window, and I watched my phone. The screen was my only window into the life I used to have. It was a digital periscope. I wasn't just sitting there sulking. I was gathering intelligence. I had set up alerts for everything. Google alerts for Chloe Penhaligon, Zillow alerts for the address 4000 Summit Drive, credit monitoring updates via Saul. I was the spider. She was the fly. And the fly was thrashing around, breaking the web, thinking she was free. Tuesday, 4 p.m. The first text from Saul arrived while I was brushing crumbs off my shirt. Saul, she's doing it. She's cleaning house. Literally. I stared at the screen. What do you mean? I typed back. Saul, she just fired the staff. All of them. Effective immediately. No severance. I felt a physical blow to my gut. Rosa had been our housekeeper for 22 years. She had cleaned up Chloe's vomit when she had the flu. She had held Martha's hand when the chemo got bad. Marcus, the gardener, was 70 years old. He lived in the cottage on the grounds. He had nowhere else to go. My phone buzzed again. A voicemail. It was from Rosa. I held the phone to my ear. I could hear her sobbing. Mr. Arthur? She told us to leave. She said the security guards would escort us out in an hour. She said we were unnecessary overhead. Mr. Arthur, I don't know what to do. Marcus is packing his truck. I closed my eyes. My grip on the phone tightened until the plastic case creaked. I wanted to call Chloe. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to drive up there and tell her that these people were family, not overhead. I wanted to write Rosa a check for $50,000 right now, but I couldn't. If I intervened, if I sent money, if I called the staff, Chloe could argue in court that I was still managing the estate, that I had access to funds, or that I was interfering with her role as presumptive executor. It would weaken my claim of total exclusion. I had to let them suffer. I had to let Rosa cry. I had to let Marcus lose his home. It was the hardest thing I had ever done.
I opened my notebook. My hand shook as I wrote. Evidence item number 3. Wrongful termination of long-term staff. Malicious administration. Action. Full restitution and rehiring of all staff to be mandated in final settlement. I'm sorry, Rosa, I whispered to the empty motel room. I'll make it right. Just hold on. Wednesday, 10 a.m. I had barely slept. I was staring at the water stains on the ceiling when my phone pinged with a Zillow notification. New listing, 4000 Summit Drive. I sat up. I tapped the link. The listing loaded. There it was, my home. The photos were from an old Architectural Digest shoot 5 years ago, photos that still had my books on the shelves, my art on the walls. Then I looked at the price. Asking price? $15 million. I gasped. The air left my lungs. The estate had been appraised 6 months ago at $25 million. The land alone was worth $12. $15 million? That wasn't a sale. That was a fire sale. That was the price of meth addict desperation. I called Saul immediately. Did you see it? I asked. I see it, Saul said, his voice sounding weary. She's dumping it. She wants a cash buyer, 30-day close. She needs to pay off the bridge loan and fund the G-Wagon lifestyle before the interest eats her alive. She's undervaluing the primary asset by 40%, I said. Saul, that's criminal negligence. That's a breach of fiduciary duty before she's even appointed fiduciary. It's worse than that, Saul said. I made some calls. She's telling realtors she has full authority to sell. She's trying to get under contract by Friday. She thinks if she has a signed offer, the judge will have to let it proceed. She's delusional. She's dangerous. Arthur, if she gets a buyer on the hook and they put down earnest money, this gets messy. We'll be fighting lawsuits from the buyer and the bank. Let her, I said. The coldness was back. The anger about Rosa had hardened into ice. Let her sign the papers. Let her take a deposit. Arthur, if she signs a contract to sell a house she doesn't legally own yet, what is that, Saul? It's fraud, Saul said. Wire fraud if she takes the deposit electronically. Exactly. I hung up.
I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. A stray cat was picking through a McDonald's bag near the dumpster. Chloe was digging. She was digging so fast and so deep that she couldn't see the sky anymore. She thought the 15 million would be her golden parachute. She didn't realize she was jumping out of the plane without a rig. I looked at the call button next to Chloe's name on my screen. One tap. That's all it would take. Chloe, stop. You can't list the house for 15 million. You don't have the deed. You're going to go to jail. I could save her. I could be the father she hated, but the father who saved her anyway. I remembered the rain. I remembered the laugh. I remembered her burning my golf clubs. I remembered Rosa crying. I put the phone down on the nightstand, screen down. I went back to my crackers. They tasted like sawdust. I wasn't going to interrupt. I was going to let the clock run out. Friday was 48 hours away. She had 48 hours to destroy everything she touched, and I would be there, sitting in the silence, documenting every single swing of the hammer.
Thursday night settled over the city like a suffocating blanket. Inside room 114 of the Motel 6, the air was still and stale. I sat on the edge of the bed, my back rigid, staring at the muted television screen. A local news anchor was mouthing words I didn't hear, gesturing at a weather map covered in blue storm fronts. Tomorrow was Friday, the probate hearing. In the legal world, probate is usually a dull, bureaucratic affair. It is the shuffling of papers, the stamping of forms, the quiet transfer of assets from the dead to the living. It is a process designed to be boring. But tomorrow wasn't going to be boring. Tomorrow was going to be a massacre. I looked at the small pile of items arranged on the cheap laminate desk, my notebook filled with the damning timeline of the last 4 days, the crumpled receipt from the urgent care, the printout of the Zillow listing, the text messages from Saul confirming the bridge loan. It was an arsenal. I had enough ammunition to not just win the estate, but to bury Chloe under a mountain of litigation that would take her a decade to dig out of. But there was one thing holding me back, one lingering thread of doubt that I couldn't quite cut. Martha. I closed my eyes and saw my wife's face.
I heard her voice, weak and breathy from that last night in the hospital. Promise me you'll take care of her. Was destroying Chloe taking care of her? Was stripping her of her inheritance, humiliating her in court, and leaving her with massive debt the act of a loving father? Or was it the vengeance of a bitter old man? I needed to know. I needed to be absolutely certain that there was nothing left to save. I needed to know that the daughter I had raised, the little girl who used to cry when she scraped her knee, the teenager who used to ask me for advice on her college essays, was truly gone. I needed to offer her one last off-ramp. I picked up my phone. The screen was cracked, a spiderweb of glass fracturing the light. It was a fitting metaphor for our family. I opened the messaging app. I typed slowly, my thumbs hovering over the glass. I didn't want to sound like a lawyer. I didn't want to sound like the architect. I needed to sound like a father who had reached the end of his rope. Chloe, I typed. It's Dad. I paused. She hated that word. Please, I'm at a Motel 6. I'm running out of money. I don't have anywhere else to go. I know you're angry, and I know you want the house to be perfect, but please let me come home. We can work this out. We can talk before the hearing tomorrow. I just want us to be a family again. Mom would want that. I read it over. It was pathetic. It was desperate. It was exactly what a beaten man would write. If she replied with even a shred of humanity, if she said, "Fine, come over, but stay in the guest room," or even, "We'll talk at the lawyer's office, get some sleep," I would reconsider. I would tell Sal to hold back the bad faith contingency. I would let her have the money, or at least a significant portion of it. I would absorb the blow to save her from herself. I took a deep breath. My heart gave a nervous flutter, a reminder of my missing medication. I hit send. The message bubble turned blue. Delivered. I placed the phone on the nightstand. I clasped my hands together and waited. The seconds ticked by. The refrigerator in the corner hummed and rattled. A car drove past outside, its headlights sweeping across the curtains, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. 1 minute. 2 minutes. Maybe she was asleep. Maybe she was out celebrating. Maybe she was looking at the text, feeling a pang of guilt. Maybe she was remembering the time I taught her to drive, or the time I bailed her out of that mess in college without telling Martha. Bzzz. The phone vibrated against the wood of the nightstand. The sound was like a gunshot in the silence. I stared at it. The screen was lit up. A notification from Chloe. I didn't pick it up immediately. I let it sit there for a moment, glowing in the dark. This was Schrodinger's text. As long as I didn't read it, there was still a chance she was my daughter. As soon as I unlocked that screen, the wave function would collapse, and I would know the truth. I reached out. My hand was steady now. The nervousness was gone, replaced by a cold, clinical curiosity. I picked up the phone. I unlocked it. I read the message. "Lose this number, leech. You're blocked. And don't think about showing up at the house. I've already instructed security to arrest you on sight. Honestly, you'll be lucky if I don't sue you for back rent for the last 20 years. Die quietly, Arthur. You're embarrassing me." I read it once. I read it twice. Die quietly. I let the phone lower to my lap. I sat there in the dim light, feeling nothing. I expected to feel sad. I expected to feel a surge of fresh anger, but I didn't. I felt a strange, weightless sense of relief. The burden was gone. The guilt was gone. The promise to Martha had been fulfilled. "I tried, Martha," I said aloud. My voice was calm. I gave her the chance. I gave her the rope. She had chosen to tie the noose. She didn't just want the money. She wanted me dead. She wanted the total erasure of the man who had raised her. She called me a leech, projecting her own parasitic nature onto me. She threatened to sue me for living in my own home. The moral ambiguity was cleared. The fog of war had lifted. I wasn't a father anymore. I was an adversary, and she was an enemy combatant who had just signaled her intent to give no quarter. So she would receive none. I picked up the phone again. I didn't reply to her. I took a screenshot of her message. I opened my email and attached the screenshot. I sent it to Saul with the subject line, Exhibit F, Final Malice. Then I stood up. I walked to the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror one last time.
The gray stubble on my chin, the dark circles under my eyes, the hollow cheeks. I looked like a victim. I looked like a man who had been broken. Perfect. I stripped off my undershirt. I turned on the shower, making it as hot as I could stand. I scrubbed my skin, washing away the smell of the motel, the smell of the gas station, the smell of failure. When I stepped out, I didn't reach for the towel. I stood on the bath mat, dripping wet, staring at my reflection. "Arthur is dead," I whispered. I walked back into the bedroom and opened the closet. My suit was hanging there, the mud-stained funeral suit. I hadn't cleaned it. I hadn't pressed it. I touched the fabric. It was stiff with dried dirt. The hem of the trousers was caked with oil. I would wear it tomorrow. I would wear it like armor. Chloe would arrive in her Balenciaga and her G-Wagon, looking like a queen. I would arrive, looking like a beggar. The judge would see us. The lawyers would see us. And before a single word was spoken, the story would be told. I went to the desk and picked up the red pen I had bought from the front desk. I opened my notebook to the final page. I wrote one sentence in block letters. "The trap is armed." I closed the book. I turned off the light. I lay down on the lumpy mattress, pulling the thin, scratchy blanket up to my chin. For the first time since the funeral, my heart wasn't fluttering. It was beating slow and strong. Thump, 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 thump. I slept the sleep of the righteous. Tomorrow, the hammer would fall.
Friday morning broke with a deceptive calm. The sky was a bruised shade of purple, clearing slowly to a hard, cold blue. It was the kind of crisp, bright morning that usually signaled a fresh start. For Chloe, it signaled payday. For me, it signaled the end of the masquerade. I checked out of the Motel 6 at 8:15 a.m. I left the keycard on the stained nightstand next to the empty wrapper of my peanut butter crackers. I didn't have much to carry, just my waterlogged duffel bag and the notebook that contained the destruction of my daughter's future. I called a cab, not an Uber Black, not a Lyft Lux, a standard, rattling yellow taxi with a suspension that had given up the ghost somewhere in the late 90s. "Where to?" the driver asked, eyeing me in the rearview mirror. He looked concerned. I couldn't blame him. I looked like a vagrant who had stolen a dead man's suit. 400 Market Street, I said. "The Sterling Building." He raised an eyebrow. "That's the high-rise district, pal. Lawyers and bankers. You sure?" "I have an appointment," I said. The ride was uncomfortable. The taxi smelled of pine air freshener and old sweat. Every pothole sent a jolt through my spine, reminding me of the night I'd spent on the thin motel mattress. But I sat still, staring out the window as the city rolled by. We entered the financial district. The buildings grew taller, the glass cleaner, the pedestrians sharper. Men in three-piece suits walked briskly with leather briefcases. Women in power suits marched with purpose. And then there was me. The taxi pulled up to the curb in front of the Sterling Building. It was a monolith of steel and glass, housing the city's most expensive law firms. Sterling, Holt, and Vance occupied the top 3 floors. It was where I had practiced for 20 years. It was where I had met Martha. "That'll be $28.50, the driver said. I counted out my remaining cash. I handed him $30. "Keep the change." I stepped out onto the sidewalk. The wind was biting. It whipped the loose fabric of my trousers around my legs. I stood there for a moment, adjusting my jacket. The mud stains from the gas station had set into stiff brown maps on the dark wool. The collar was frayed. My tie was wrinkled. I looked like a man who had lost everything, which was exactly the point. Passers-by gave me a wide berth. A young man in a tailored navy suit glanced at me, curled his lip in disgust, and checked his Rolex. He didn't recognize me. 3 years ago, he would have held the door for me. Today, I was invisible debris on the sidewalk of commerce. Then, I heard it. A low, guttural roar echoed off the glass canyons. It was the distinctive, aggressive growl of a twin-turbo V8 engine. I didn't need to turn around to know what it was. The matte black Mercedes G63 AMG tore around the corner. It was a tank of a vehicle, boxy and imposing, designed for military use, but driven by people who needed to announce their net worth at every stoplight. It wasn't just a car, it was a statement. It was $200,000 of "look at me."
The G-Wagon surged toward the valet stand, cutting off a Lexus. The brakes squealed as it came to a halt mere inches from the curb, directly in front of me. The engine died. The door swung open. Chloe stepped out.
If I was the picture of ruin, she was the portrait of excess. She wore a black Balenciaga blazer with exaggerated shoulders, paired with oversized sunglasses that covered half her face. Her shoes were red-bottomed Louboutins that clicked sharply on the pavement. In her right hand, she clutched a venti Starbucks cup. In her left, she held her iPhone like a weapon. She didn't look at the valet, who rushed to open her door. She just tossed the keys in his general direction. He fumbled to catch them. "Keep it close," she barked, not breaking her stride. "I'm out of here in 30 minutes. She turned toward the building entrance. Her gaze swept over the sidewalk, sliding right past me as if I were a lamppost or a trash can. "Chloe," I said. She stopped. She pivoted slowly on her heel, lowering her sunglasses just enough to peer over the rim. Her eyes were cold, annoyed. "Oh," she said. "You made it." She looked me up and down. Her nose wrinkled slightly, as if she had caught a whiff of something rotting. "Jesus, Arthur, you look homeless. Did you sleep in a gutter?" "I slept where I could afford to sleep," I said. My voice was raspy. I kept my shoulders slumped, my hands clasping the strap of my dirty duffel bag. She scoffed. She took a sip of her coffee. "Well, try not to touch anything in the lobby. Saul's office just had the upholstery redone." She checked her watch, a Cartier tank that Martha had given her for graduation. "Let's go. I have a shopping appointment at Neiman's at 11. This little formality is already eating into my day." "Formality?" I asked. "The reading, Arthur. The stamp. The check. Whatever." She waved her hand dismissively. "I just need Saul to sign off on the transfer so the bank releases the rest of the funds. I'm tired of using credit." She turned and walked toward the revolving doors. She didn't hold the door for me. She pushed through, her reflection fracturing in the glass segments. I followed her. The lobby of the Sterling Building was a cathedral of capitalism. Marble floors, vaulted ceilings, security guards in blazers. The air smelled of expensive HVAC systems and money. Chloe marched to the elevator bank, tapping her foot impatiently as she waited. I stood 3 feet behind her. "I tried to text you last night," I said softly. She didn't turn around. "Blocked, remember? I just wanted to talk, before we go up there, before it's too late." The elevator dinged. The doors slid open. She stepped inside and hit the button for the 40th floor. She held the open button with a look of supreme reluctance, waiting for me to shuffle in. "It's already too late, Arthur," she said as the doors closed, sealing us in the silent mirrored box. "It was already too late the moment Mom died. You're just a line item I'm deleting. Don't take it personally. It's just business." "Business?" I repeated. "Is that what this is?" "Asset management," she corrected. She looked at her reflection in the elevator door, checking her lipstick. "You're a liability. I'm an asset. That's how the world works." She looked at me in the mirror. For a second, her expression faltered. Maybe she saw the bags under my eyes. Maybe she saw the tremor in my hand. "Look," she said, her voice dropping an octave, sounding almost bored. "Once this is done, I'll have Saul write you a check. 5 grand. Enough to get a deposit on an apartment and buy a new suit. I'm not a monster. I just don't want you in my house." 5 grand, I said, "for 25 years? Take it or leave it. But if you make a scene upstairs, if you cry, I cut it to 0. The elevator dinged. Floor 40. Sterling, Holt, and Vance. The doors opened. The reception area was sleek and intimidating. A glass desk sat in front of a wall of windows offering a panoramic view of the city. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah who had started after I retired, looked up. Her eyes went wide when she saw Chloe. The glamour, the energy. Then her eyes shifted to me. Confusion. Pity. "Mr. Penhaligon?" she asked, uncertainly. "Is that you?" I offered a weak, trembling smile. "Hello, Sarah. We have the conference room ready," she stammered. "Mr. Vance is waiting." Chloe breezed past the desk. "Great. Let's get this over with. Does the conference room have an outlet? My phone is at 20%. She marched down the hallway, the heels clicking rhythmically. Click-clack, click-clack, the sound of a ticking clock. I followed her, dragging my feet slightly on the plush carpet.
We reached the main boardroom. Double mahogany doors. Inside, a long table polished to a mirror shine. At the head of the table sat Saul. Saul Vance looked tired. He was 60 years old, with thinning gray hair and a face that had seen every kind of legal battle imaginable. He wore his serious face today. When we walked in, Saul stood up. He looked at Chloe, then he looked at me. His eyes lingered on my suit. He saw the mud. He saw the exhaustion. He gave me a microscopic nod. Acknowledgement. "Morning, Saul," Chloe said, tossing her Starbucks cup onto a coaster and dropping her Balenciaga bag on the table. She pulled out the leather chair at the opposite end of the table and sat down, spinning it slightly. "Let's skip the pleasantries. I have a stylist waiting." I walked to the chair on the right side of the table. I didn't sit immediately. I placed my duffel bag on the floor. I placed my notebook on the table. "Hello, Saul," I said. "Arthur," Saul said. His voice was grave. "Please, sit." I lowered myself into the chair. It was soft, expensive leather. It felt like the throne I used to occupy. Chloe tapped her nails on the table. "Okay, Saul, where do I sign? The bank needs the executor decree by noon to clear the wire for the G-Wagon." Saul adjusted his glasses. He opened a thick leather binder in front of him. He didn't look at Chloe, he looked at the papers. "We have to follow protocol, Chloe," Saul said. "This is a formal reading of the last will and testament of Martha Penhaligon." "Yada yada," Chloe said, pulling off her phone and scrolling. "She leaves it all to me. I've seen the draft. Just read the part where I get the money." I folded my hands in my lap. I looked at the water pitcher in the center of the table. I looked at the view of the city behind Saul, the city where Chloe was currently spending money she didn't have. She was so confident. She was so sure. She sat there in her fortress of arrogance, armed with a fake will and a bridge loan, thinking she was the queen of the board. She didn't notice that the room was cold. She didn't notice that Saul hadn't offered her water. She didn't notice that I wasn't shaking anymore. "Very low," Saul said. He cleared his throat. The room went silent. The only sound was the distant hum of the city and the soft tap-tap of Chloe's thumb on her screen. "I, Martha Penhaligon," Saul began, reading from the document, "being of sound mind and body," I closed my eyes. "Here we go." Saul adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. He looked down at the document, his finger tracing the line of text. The air conditioning in the boardroom hummed, a low drone that seemed to amplify the silence. "We will proceed to Article 4, Saul said, his voice flat and professional. "Distribution of assets." Chloe sighed loudly. She dropped her phone onto the mahogany table with a clatter. Finally, the good part. I sat perfectly still, my hands resting on my knees under the table. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm. This was the moment I had anticipated for 3 years. This was the lure, and she was swimming right toward it with her mouth wide open. Saul cleared his throat. He began to read. "I, Martha Penhaligon, being of sound mind and memory, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, revoking all prior wills and codicils. Regarding the residue of my estate, including the real property known as the Summit, all shares in kinetic systems, and all liquid assets held in the Penhaligon Family Trust, collectively valued at approximately $55 million. Saul paused for a breath. Chloe leaned forward, her eyes gleaming like a wolf staring at a wounded deer. "I hereby devise and bequeath the entirety of said estate to my beloved and only daughter, Chloe Penhaligon." The last syllable barely left Saul's mouth before Chloe slammed her open palm onto the table. Whack! "Boom!" she shouted. "Done! That's a wrap!" She spun her chair around, facing the window, throwing her arms up in a victory V. "Did you hear that, Saul? Entirety. That means all of it. Every dime, every brick." She turned back to the table, grabbing her Starbucks cup and raising it in a mock toast. "God, I knew Mom wouldn't let me down. She knew who the real successor was." Saul looked up from the binder. His expression didn't change. He didn't close the book. He didn't reach for a pen. He just watched her. "Chloe," Saul said, "I haven't dismissed the meeting." "Oh, relax, Saul," she laughed. "Cut the check, wire the funds. I have a flight to the Maldives at 4 p.m., first class. I need to get to the airport lounge." She stood up, smoothing down her Balenciaga blazer. She looked at me then. The look wasn't just cold, it was triumphant. It was the look of a conqueror surveying the defeated. She walked around the edge of the table and stopped right next to my chair. She loomed over me. I smelled her expensive perfume, something heavy with jasmine and vanilla. It clashed with the smell of my damp, dirty suit. "Well, Arthur," she said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy, "I guess that's it. The architect didn't build himself a safety net, did he?" I looked up at her. I kept my face blank. "Is that all you have to say, Chloe?" She smirked. She reached into her purse and pulled out a $20 bill. She crumbled it into a ball and flicked it at me. It bounced off my chest and landed on the floor next to my muddy duffel bag. "Pack your trash, Dad. You're trespassing on my vibe. Get out of my building. Get out of my city. And if I see you near my house again, I'm having you arrested for stalking." She turned back to Saul. "Come on, Saul, where's the signature line? I have a G-Wagon to pick up on the way to the airport." I looked at the crumpled $20 bill on the floor. She had taken the bait. She had swallowed the hook, the line, and half the sinker. She had just admitted in front of legal counsel that she intended to take everything and leave me with nothing but a ball of paper.
I slowly bent down. My joints cracked. I picked up the money. "Thank you, Chloe," I said softly. "Don't mention it," she said, waving a hand. "Buy yourself a sandwich. It's the last meal you're getting from me." She looked at Saul, drumming her manicured fingernails on the leather binder. "Well, let's go. Chop chop." Saul didn't move. He didn't blink. He looked over the rim of his glasses, his eyes hard as flint. "Sit down, Chloe," Saul said. "Excuse me?" "I said sit down," Saul repeated, his voice dropping to a register I had rarely heard him use. "I didn't say the sentence was finished." Chloe rolled her eyes, but the authority in Saul's voice made her pause. "Oh my God, what is it? A tax clause? A charity donation? Fine, read it, but make it fast." She flopped back into her leather chair, crossing her arms. "I'm listening, but I'm bored." I smoothed the $20 bill on the table, pressing out the wrinkles with my thumb. 1, 2, 3. The trap was about to snap shut. The silence in the boardroom stretched thin and tight, like a rubber band pulled to its breaking point. Chloe was still vibrating with manic energy, her foot tapping a rapid staccato against the leg of the mahogany table. She was looking at the ceiling, checking the time on her phone, utterly checked out of the proceedings. Saul didn't move. He sat like a statue carved from granite. His eyes were fixed on Chloe over the rim of his glasses. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe. "Saul," Chloe said, snapping her fingers. "Earth to lawyer. Did you have a stroke? I said give me the pen." She reached across the table, her fingers grasping for the heavy Mont Blanc fountain pen resting near the binder. Saul's hand shot out. It was a quick, decisive movement, shocking for a man of his age. He covered the pen with his palm. "I haven't finished the paragraph, Chloe," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. Chloe froze. Her hand hovered in midair. She let out a short, incredulous laugh. "What do you mean you haven't finished? You said entirety. You said absolute. I know what those words mean. I went to Brown." "I read the bequest," Saul said, sliding the binder a fraction of an inch closer to himself. "I did not read the condition." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The hum of the air conditioning sounded suddenly loud, like a distant engine warning of a crash. I watched Chloe's face. The smile didn't disappear, but it flickered. It was the look of someone who steps onto a stair that isn't there, a momentary loss of equilibrium. "Condition?" she repeated. "There are no conditions. Mom told me. She said, it's all yours, baby. She never mentioned conditions. Martha protected you from the details, but she also protected the legacy." He looked down at the document. He smoothed the page with a deliberate, slow motion of his hand. "I will continue," he said. Chloe pulled her hand back and crossed her arms. She rolled her eyes, but she stopped tapping her foot. "Fine, read the fine print.
Does it say I have to keep the cat? Because I already gave it to the housekeeper." Saul ignored her. He began to read again, picking up exactly where he had left off, his voice taking on a sharper, more legalistic edge. "This bequest is absolute, provided that the family unity protocol has been observed in full during the transitional probate period." Saul stopped. He looked up. Chloe stared at him. She blinked once, twice. "The what?" she asked. "The family unity protocol," Saul repeated. "I've never heard of that," Chloe said, her voice rising in pitch. "What is a unity protocol? It sounds like some cult nonsense." "It is an amendment added to the trust bylaws 3 years ago," Saul explained calmly. "It was drafted by your father." Chloe's head snapped toward me. Her eyes narrowed into slits. "You," she spat, "you wrote this?" I remained silent. I sat with my hands folded over the $20 bill she had thrown at me. I looked at her with a calm, neutral expression. The architect was in the room now. "What is it?" Chloe demanded, turning back to Saul. "Is it some clause where I have to visit him on Sundays? Fine, I'll visit him. I'll bring him a cookie. Just give me the check." Saul shook his head slowly. "It is not about visitation, Chloe. It is about conduct. It is a poison pill provision designed to prevent the abuse of vulnerable family members during the transfer of power." "Abuse?" Chloe scoffed. "Who's being abused? He's fine. Look at him. He's sitting right there." "The protocol is specific," Saul said. "It triggers automatically if the primary beneficiary, that's you, fails to adhere to basic standards of humane treatment toward the surviving spouse prior to the settlement of the estate." Chloe's face went pale. The blood drained out of her cheeks, leaving her makeup looking like a mask. She started to do the math. She started to remember the last 4 days. The gas station, the rain, the lockout, the text message. That's ridiculous," she stammered. "That's subjective. You can't quantify humane treatment. That wouldn't hold up in court." "Actually," Saul said, flipping the page of the binder with a sharp crackle, "it is quite quantifiable. Clause 12b defines the triggers very clearly." He looked at me. "Arthur, are you ready?" I nodded slowly. "Ready for what?" Chloe screamed, slamming her hand on the table again. "Stop talking in riddles. What does Clause 12b say?" Saul adjusted his glasses. He looked at Chloe with a mixture of pity and professional detachment. "You might want to sit down for this part, Chloe, and maybe put the Starbucks down. You're going to need your hands free." Saul flipped the page of the heavy binder. The parchment made a sharp, dry sound, like a dead leaf being crushed. Chloe was gripping the edge of the table. Her knuckles were white. The arrogance that had filled the room 30 seconds ago was evaporating, replaced by a twitchy, feral alertness. She was a cornered animal sensing a trap, but she still couldn't see the cage. "Read it," she hissed. "Read the damn clause." Saul ran his finger down the text. He didn't rush. He let the silence do the work. Clause 12b, the bad faith contingency, Saul read. "In the event that the primary beneficiary, Chloe Penhaligon, attempts to assert control over the estate prior to the issuance of letters testamentary, specific behavioral conditions must be met to ensure the safety and dignity of the surviving spouse, Arthur Penhaligon." Chloe let out a breathy laugh. "Safety and dignity? Give me a break. I didn't hit him." "Let me finish," Saul said sharply. He adjusted his glasses and leaned in closer to the page. "The clause stipulates that if, at any point between the death of the testator and the closing of probate, the surviving spouse is A. removed from the primary residence against his will, B. denied access to marital funds necessary for basic maintenance, or C. subjected to documented malicious intent." Saul paused. He looked up at Chloe. "Then, the family unity protocol is deemed to have been violated. The primary bequest is immediately nullified on the grounds of bad faith." The room went dead silent. Chloe stared at Saul. Her mouth hung open slightly. She blinked, her brain trying to process the legalese. "Nullified?" she whispered. What does nullified mean?" "It means void, Chloe," I said. She whipped her head around to look at me.
I was still sitting calmly, my hands folded over the $20 bill. I wasn't the trembling old man anymore. I was the lawyer who had spent 30 years destroying hostile takeovers. "You shut up," she snapped. "You don't get to talk." "Actually," Saul interjected, "he does, because according to the evidence provided to my office this morning, all 3 conditions of Clause 12B have been met." Saul reached into a folder next to the binder. He pulled out a stack of papers and slid them across the polished mahogany. "Exhibit A," Saul said, pointing to a photograph. "A time-stamped image of Arthur standing in the rain at the Texaco station on Tuesday, surrounded by his belongings. Taken from the security camera feed, which Arthur subpoenaed yesterday." Chloe's eyes widened. You got the tapes?" "Exhibit B," Saul continued, sliding another paper. "The log from the security system at the summit. It shows Arthur's key code was deactivated at 8 a.m. on Wednesday. It also shows a distinct entry, user Chloe, admin override, lockout protocol, initiated." Chloe swallowed hard. She reached for her Starbucks cup, but her hand was shaking too much. She pulled it back. "Exhibit C," Saul said, sliding the final piece of paper. It was a printout of the text message she had sent me last night. The screenshot was blown up, the words stark and black against the white paper. "Lose this number, leech. You'll be lucky if I don't sue you. Die quietly." "Malicious intent," Saul said softly. "Textbook definition." Chloe stared at the text message. Her face was turning a blotchy red. She looked from the paper to me, and for the first time I saw genuine fear in her eyes. "This is entrapment," she screamed, her voice cracking. "You tricked me. You texted me first. You begged me." "I gave you an opportunity," I said. My voice was low, steady, and cold. "I gave you a chance to prove you were a daughter, not a predator. You failed the test." "It's not fair," she shouted, standing up and knocking her chair back. It hit the wall with a loud bang. "I was grieving. I was stressed. You can't take $55 million away from me because I sent a mean text message." "I didn't take it away, Chloe. You threw it away. When you threw my bag in that puddle, you threw the money in with it." "Saul," she pleaded, turning to the lawyer, "you can't do this. Martha wanted me to have the money. This is a technicality. It's a trick." "It is a binding legal contract," Saul said, "one that I drafted and one that Martha signed. She feared exactly this scenario, Chloe. She feared that without her you would turn on your father. She hoped she was wrong, but she signed the clause just in case." Chloe was panting now. She looked at the door as if thinking about running, but there was nowhere to run. "So what? So I don't get the whole 55? Fine, I violate the protocol. What's the penalty? A fine? Do I have to pay him $1 million? Fine, take $1 million. Just give me the rest." I slowly picked up the $20 bill from the table. I smoothed it out again. "You don't understand, Chloe," I said. "Understand what?" "The penalty isn't a fine," I said. "The penalty is a substitution of bequest." I looked at Saul. "Tell her what she gets, Saul." Saul looked down at the binder. He read the final sentence of Clause 12B. "In the event of a bad faith trigger, the primary beneficiary shall be disinherited from the bulk estate and shall instead receive the statutory minimum allowed under state law to prevent a contest of the will." Chloe went still. "Statutory minimum? What is that? Like 10%? I stood up. I walked around the table until I was standing right in front of her. She shrank back, intimidated by the sudden change in my posture. I wasn't stooped anymore. I was standing at my full height. "In this state," I said, looking her dead in the eye, "the statutory minimum required to prove you weren't accidentally omitted from the will is $1. Chloe blinked. $1 million? $1, I corrected. $1 single dollar. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out her crumbled 20. I placed it on the table. Then I reached into my own pocket. I pulled out 4 quarters. I dropped them onto the mahogany table. Clink, 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 clink. "Actually," I said, "I don't have a bill. But here, 4 quarters. That's your inheritance, Chloe."
She stared at the coins. The silence in the room was absolute. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." "Yes," I said. "You wanted to be independent? You wanted to stage the house? You wanted to erase me?" I leaned in close. "Congratulations. You own nothing. The house isn't yours. The accounts aren't yours. The G-Wagon isn't yours. But," she stammered, her eyes darting around the room in panic, "but I took the loan. I spent the money." "I know. And that brings us to the most interesting part of the morning." I looked at Saul. "Where did the money go, Saul?"
The sound of the 4/4 settling on the mahogany table seemed to echo like gunshots. Clink, 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 clink. Chloe stared at the coins. Her brain, usually so adept at calculating margins and social clout, seemed to short-circuit. She looked at the silver faces of George Washington, then up at me, then at Saul. Then she screamed. It wasn't a cry of sorrow. It was a shriek of pure, unadulterated entitlement. It was the sound of a child who had been told no for the first time in 26 years. "You can't do that!" she yelled, lunging forward and sweeping the quarters off the table. They scattered across the room, rolling into the plush carpet. "It's my money. It's my birthright. You can't just take it away with some secret clause." She turned on Saul, her face twisted into a mask of ugly rage. "This is fraud. I'll sue you. I'll sue this entire firm. You conspired to steal my inheritance. I want the deed. I want the accounts. Give them to me now." Saul didn't flinch. He didn't even recoil from her screaming. He sat calmly, his hands resting on the open binder, looking at her with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a volatile chemical reaction. "I haven't stolen anything, Chloe," Saul said, his voice cutting through her hysteria. "And neither has Arthur. We have simply followed the instructions of the trust." "The trust is for me!" she shrieked. "I'm the daughter. I'm the heir." "You were the primary beneficiary. Past tense." "What do you mean, past tense?" She was hyperventilating now, her chest heaving beneath the Balenciaga blazer. "Fix it. Undo it. Tear up that page. I'll pay you double whatever he's paying you." I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "He's not being paid, Chloe. This is pro bono. It's a favor to your mother." "My mother would never do this," she screamed at me. "She loved me. She built this for me. You poisoned her against me." "She did love you," I said. "That's why she gave you a choice. She left the door open. All you had to do was walk through it with a shred of decency. Instead, you burned the house down." "I want my money," she roared, slamming her fists on the table. Saul closed the binder. The heavy thud signaled the end of the debate. "It was never your money, Chloe," Saul said quietly. "It was the Kinetics family trust. It was a revocable living trust that became irrevocable the moment Martha passed. The assets did not belong to you. They belonged to the trust entity." He reached for his laptop, which had been sitting closed on the side table. He opened it and woke the screen. He turned the laptop around so she could see the display. It was a banking interface, a wire transfer confirmation screen. "The trust instrument has a specific instruction flow," Saul explained, pointing to the screen. "If the bad faith contingency is triggered, which happened on Tuesday when you evicted Arthur, the assets are automatically reclassified." Chloe squinted at the screen. Her eyes darted across the numbers. "What am I looking at?" she whispered. "Where are the zeros?" "You are looking at the outgoing wire transfer log. Per the automated instructions I set up on Monday night after Arthur sent me the video of you throwing his bag in the puddle, the trust liquidated the portfolio." "Liquidated?" Chloe grabbed the edge of the laptop, her fingernails digging into the casing. "Liquidated to where?" "Read the beneficiary line," I said. Chloe's eyes dropped to the line item. "Beneficiary, National Dog Rescue Foundation. Amount, $55,400,210. Status, cleared. Timestamp, 9 a.m. EST. Chloe froze. She stopped breathing. She stared at the words. National Dog Rescue Foundation. "Dogs?" she whispered. Her voice was so high it was barely audible. "You gave $55 million to dogs?" "Stray dogs," I corrected.
Unwanted dogs. Dogs that have been kicked out of their homes and left in the rain. Dogs that people thought were useless. It seemed poetic. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with a horror that transcended greed. "You're joking. This is a sick joke. You can't give $50 million to a charity in 5 minutes." "It wasn't 5 minutes," Saul said. "The transfer was queued for 72 hours. It was scheduled to execute at 9 a.m. EST this morning, the exact moment the probate hearing was scheduled to begin, unless a stop order was entered." Saul leaned back in his chair. The stop order required Arthur to sign a waiver stating that reconciliation had occurred. Since Arthur did not sign such a waiver, the clock ran out. "It's gone?" she asked. "All of it?" "It's wire funds, Chloe," Saul said. "It hit their account an hour ago. By now, the board of directors of the foundation is probably popping champagne. It's the largest single donation in their history. It's irrevocable, it's tax-deductible, and it is absolutely 100% gone." Chloe stumbled back. She fell into her leather chair. She looked like she had been shot in the gut. "No," she moaned. "No, no, no. I have plans. I have the penthouse. I have the trip." "You have nothing," I said. "I can sue," she yelled, grasping at straws. "I'll sue the Dog Foundation. I'll tell them it was a mistake." "You can try," Saul said, "but you'll be suing a charitable organization using a will that explicitly disinherits you based on your own documented abuse. The press would eat you alive. Billionaire heiress tries to steal money from homeless puppies. Go ahead, file the brief. I'll enjoy reading the headlines." She put her head in her hands. She was shaking violently now. The reality was crashing down on her like a collapsing building. "Why?" she sobbed into her palms. "Why dogs?" "Because you called me a poodle," I said. She looked up, her mascara running down her cheeks in black streaks. "You called me a pet," I continued. "You said I was just something Martha kept around to look good. You treated me like an animal you could kick to the curb when you got tired of feeding me. So I thought it was only fair that the money should go to creatures who actually appreciate loyalty." I walked over to the window. I looked out at the city skyline. "Martha loved that charity," I said softly. "She used to volunteer there before the company took off. She always said that if we ever lost everything, as long as we had the dogs, we'd be okay. I think she'd be happy to know her legacy is saving thousands of lives instead of buying you a G-Wagon." "The G-Wagon," Chloe whispered. Her eyes widened. The realization hit her. She wasn't just broke. She was in the negative. I turned back to face her. "That's right, Chloe. Let's talk about your Tuesday." I, she stammered. "You took out a bridge loan," I said. $2 million from First City Bank." She nodded dumbly. "You signed a personal guarantee," I said, "and you pledged the estate as collateral." "But I don't have the estate," she whispered. "Exactly," I said, "which means you committed loan fraud. You pledged assets you didn't own. And now that the estate is gone, the bank has no collateral." Saul tapped a key on his laptop. "Arthur is correct," Saul said. "The bank's algorithm monitors large asset transfers. When that $55 million left the trust account an hour ago, it triggered a liquidity alarm at First City Bank. They know the collateral is gone." What does that mean?" Chloe asked. Her voice was trembling. "It means they are going to call the loan, immediately. They will demand the full $2 million back, plus the early termination fees and the interest." "I don't have it," she cried. "I spent $800,000 on the condo deposit. I spent $200 on the car. I spent $50 on the flight." "Then you are insolvent," Saul said simply. "Bankrupt." "And it gets worse," I added. She looked at me with terrified eyes. How can it get worse?" "The bridge loan," I said. "You didn't read the fine print on that either, did you? It was a high-risk predatory loan. Do you know who underwrites the high-risk division for First City Bank?" She shook her head. "They bundle those debts and sell them," I said, "usually to private equity firms. But sometimes when the risk is very high, they sell them to collection agencies that are less than polite." I looked at my watch. It was 10:15 a.m. "The money is gone, Chloe. The charity has it. The house? I'm the surviving spouse with a life estate clause. I can live there until I die. You are the one who was homeless. I picked up my duffel bag from the floor. You wanted to erase me, I said, but you only erased yourself. Chloe sat there, stunned, broken, and surrounded by the wreckage of her own greed. The 4 quarters on the floor glinted in the sunlight. She had traded $55 million for $1. And the worst part? She hadn't even picked up the quarters yet. I think we're done here, Saul, I said. Agreed, Saul said, closing the laptop. Wait, Chloe screamed, scrambling up from the chair. She grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, desperate. Daddy, please, you can't leave me like this. I have debt. They'll kill me. You have to help me. You promised Mom. I looked down at her hand on my sleeve, the same hand that had thrown my bag into the mud. I gently but firmly peeled her fingers off my suit jacket. I did promise Mom, I said. I promised I would teach you to stand on your own 2 feet. I stepped back. Lesson begins now. I turned to the door, but before I could leave, a phone began to ring. It wasn't mine. It wasn't Saul's. It was Chloe's phone, sitting on the table where she had dropped it. The screen lit up. The name on the caller ID was flashing in bright red letters. First City Bank, Fraud Department. I looked at Chloe. She looked at the phone. She looked like she was going to vomit. You should probably answer that, I said. I walked out of the boardroom. I walked past the stunned receptionist. I walked to the elevator. Behind me, I heard the ringtone continue. Ring, ring, ring. It was the sound of consequences arriving, and they were right on time.
The ringtone was a shrill digital chirping that seemed to bounce off the glass walls of the conference room. First City Bank. First City Bank. First City Bank. Chloe stared at the screen as if it were a bomb counting down. She didn't answer it. She couldn't. Her hands were trembling so violently that if she tried to swipe the screen, she probably would have dropped the device. The screaming was over. The rage had burned itself out, replaced by the cold, suffocating vacuum of reality. She looked up at me. Her eyes were red, rimmed with smeared mascara, wide with the terrifying clarity of a person who realizes they have stepped off a ledge and there is no net. $2 million, she whispered. Her voice was brittle. I owe them $2 million. Plus interest, Saul added helpfully, not looking up from his laptop. Compounding weekly at 15%. And don't forget the early termination penalties on the bridge loan. Those usually add another 5%. And the legal fees the bank will charge you to recover the funds. Chloe slumped back in the leather chair. She looked small. The oversized Balenciaga blazer, which had looked so powerful an hour ago, now looked like a costume she was wearing to play pretend. I can't pay it, she said. I don't have it. I have maybe $4,000 in my checking account. Then you are in default, I said. And since you signed a fraudulent loan application pledging assets you didn't own, this isn't just a civil matter, Chloe. It's criminal fraud. Bank fraud is a federal offense. I believe the sentencing guidelines start at 5 years. She flinched. Jail? You'd let me go to jail? I'm not the one pressing charges, I said, slinging my duffel bag over my shoulder. The bank is. And banks don't have fathers. They don't have emotions. They only have ledgers. And you are on the wrong side of the red line.
The phone stopped ringing. The silence that followed was worse. It was heavy and ominous. Then it pinged. A voicemail. Chloe didn't check it. She didn't have to. We all knew what it said. Mr. Vance, this is the fraud department. We are initiating immediate recovery protocols. What do I do? She asked. She looked at me, pleading. Dad, tell me what to do. I looked at her. For a fleeting second, I saw the little girl who used to ask me to check under her bed for monsters. I felt a twinge in my chest. Not the heart condition, but the ghost of paternal instinct. But then I looked at the floor. I saw the 4 quarters scattered on the carpet, the statutory minimum. She hadn't picked them up. Even now, facing ruin, she couldn't bring herself to bend down and pick up $1. She was still waiting for someone else to save her. I can't tell you what to do, Chloe, I said. I'm just the poodle. I'm just the trophy husband.
I'm not qualified to give financial advice to a genius like you. I turned to Saul. I'm going now, Saul. The keys to the summit? Saul reached into his drawer and pulled out a fresh set of keys. He slid them across the table. The locks were rekeyed this morning, Arthur. The code is reset to 1984. Your access is restored. The security team has been notified that Ms. Penhaligon is no longer on the guest list. Thank you. I pocketed the keys. They felt heavy and cool. They felt like home. I looked at Chloe one last time. You wanted to be independent, I said. You wanted to strip the heavy energy out of your life. You wanted a clean slate. Well, you got it. You have 0 assets. You have 0 family. You are completely, totally independent. Dad, she sobbed. Good luck with the G-Wagon payments, I said, although I suspect that problem will solve itself in about 5 minutes. I turned and walked out the double mahogany doors. I didn't look back. I walked down the hallway, past the reception desk. Sarah, the receptionist, looked at me with wide eyes. She had heard the screaming. Have a nice day, Mr. Penhaligon, she whispered. I believe I will, Sarah, I said. I believe I will. I stepped into the elevator and hit the button for the lobby. As the doors slid shut, I took a deep breath. The air in the elevator tasted different. It didn't smell like mud and rain anymore. It smelled like victory. I watched the numbers count down. 39, 30, 20. With every floor, the weight on my shoulders lightened. For 3 years, I had been holding my breath, walking on eggshells, trying to keep the peace between a dying mother and a greedy daughter. I had absorbed the insults. I had swallowed the pride. Now I could breathe. The doors opened on the ground floor. I walked out into the lobby. The security guard nodded at me. I walked through the revolving doors and out onto the sidewalk. The sun had come out. The storm had passed, leaving the city washed clean and bright. My Uber was waiting at the curb, a sensible Toyota Camry. But directly in front of it, blocking the valet lane, was the matte black Mercedes G-Wagon, and backed up right against its bumper was a tow truck. A man in a neon vest was already hooking the chains to the undercarriage. Another man was slapping a bright orange sticker on the driver's side window. Seizure notice, First City Bank. I stopped. I couldn't help it. I watched. The valet was arguing with the tow truck driver. You can't take this. The owner is upstairs. The owner is the bank, pal, the driver grunted, tightening the winch. And the bank wants its ride back, now. The winch whined. The front of the massive $200,000 SUV lifted into the air. The tires spun uselessly. It was brutal. It was efficient. It was the street justice Saul had promised. I opened the back door of the Uber and slid in. Where to? The driver asked. I looked out the window as the G-Wagon was dragged away, leaving nothing but an empty space at the curb. The Royal Pines Golf Club, I said. The driver pulled away. I leaned back in the seat. I took out my phone. I opened my contacts. I scrolled to Chloe's name. I didn't call her. I selected block caller. Then I opened the banking app for my own private account, the one I had built up over 30 years of allowance that I had quietly invested. It wasn't 55 million, but it was enough. Enough for greens fees, enough for good scotch, enough for dignity. I closed my eyes and thought of Martha. She would have been heartbroken to see Chloe fail, but she would have been proud that I kept my promise. I didn't destroy Chloe. I just let her experience the one thing she had never tasted in her entire life: consequences. The Uber merged onto the highway, heading toward the green hills outside the city. I was 65 years old. I was a widower. I was alone. And for the first time in a long time, I was free. I checked the time. 11 a.m. If I hurried, I could make the back 9 before lunch. I smiled. It was a good day for golf.